and you thought the government was dumb.
Now, I see this all the time on Twitter, on forums, Telegram. The government is dumb. The government doesn't know what they're doing. The government this. I think they're a lot more clever than you think. In many cases, they're more clever than you, because you have to think there are people behind this. People, for the most part, are pretty clever, reasonably clever, sometimes dumb, but you always have one or two or some people that know what they're doing. And they're actively thinking of what you're doing. This is something that I know Lop has talked a lot about, which is the adversarial mindset, and something that's been lost in present day Bitcoin, which is this idea that on the internet, everybody's an adversary. Everybody's out to get you. Everybody's a scammer. Everybody's trying to, well, they're using their own incentives. So keep that in mind when you think to yourself, the government can't find me, or the government won't be able to shut us down, or anything like that. Buenas tardes, and welcome to another episode of Chainspotting, where every week I read and review the two top stories in Bitcoin, crypto, media, finance, money, your pocket, my pocket, his pocket, her pocket. Let's do it. This afternoon, Big Brother's here and Big Brother's queer. This is an article that I read out of Blockspace Media. Shout out to the guys over there, Will, Colin, Charlie. They're doing brilliant work. I'm really enjoying at least their newsletter and all the content that they're putting out there. So today I want to talk about a little discussed topic and something that people don't like to think about very often, which is regulation. But before we carry on regulating, remember, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the comments. Show me a bit of love so that the algorithm shows me a bit of love, so more people can read about this kind of stuff, can hear about this kind of stuff, can see this face in their screen and on their TV, all that sort of jazz. So I would really appreciate it. You're just a button away, just one little click. So the title of today is How Big Brother Can Attack Bitcoin Without Spending a Dime. For those of you that don't know, a dime is in the US 10 cents, and it's a tiny, tiny silver coin. I think it's the smallest actually of all of them, and it's super light, low-key useless. But anyway, this is an op-ed by Harsha Goli, the CEO and founder of Bitcoin custody provider Magnolia and a Lightning Network engineer. It's about the boring but pernicious way that compliance or regulation can be used to shackle Bitcoin and companies in its orbit. Let's dive in. I got into Bitcoin for money free from nation state control. That was almost 10 years ago, and a lot has changed since. Back then, the government was hilariously incompetent when it came to Bitcoin and its universe of altcoins. It felt like they'd never catch up, that this stuff was somehow too slippery for the boring bureaucrats. Some people still feel that's the case, but it's not. I had a conversation recently that reminded me just how much progress the state has made beneath the noses of most Bitcoiners, even those in the know. So this is a really interesting topic, especially because right now, Bitcoiners have become cheerleaders to regulation. I also got into Bitcoin for nation state free controlless money, permissionless, censorship resistant, all that sort of stuff. I actually believe that Bitcoin isn't the separation of money and state. I think that Bitcoin is the separation of money and groups of power. I know that a lot of people think that the nation state is the most abhorrent and terrifying and terrible and oppressive and repressive regime out there. I'm not entirely too sure. I do think that there's private companies that puppeteer the nation state a lot more than the nation state puppeteers them, even if the nation state is the holder of guns. People don't realize how bad it's gotten. That's because people have been cheerleading it. Well, that's also because people think that we need regulation, because otherwise this would be no man's land and all that sort of stuff. I fundamentally disagree. But I disagree on the protocol level. I disagree on the idea that we need checks to be able to use our money. I do understand that this can be a bit hard for some people to understand and grasp, that otherwise people would just be going mad. There's a completely different conversation to be had from the universe of altcoins, meme coins, who gets to launch them, how the protocols work and operate. I'm just talking about Bitcoin itself, self-custody, access in and out from off ramps and off ramps, on ramps, all that sort of stuff. Not necessarily this free for all meme coin extravaganza. People don't realize how bad it's gotten, and even the most cypherpunk among us haven't realized because, well, compliance is boring and these changes took years to manifest. But make no mistake, compliance is creeping into every corner of the Bitcoin ecosystem. Regulated exchanges are no longer the only ones beholden to KYC, AML, IRS regulations. The noose is already tied, and exchanges have felt it tighten for a long time. Now other centralized entities that don't even custody funds are feeling it. Soon, the news could be around your renegade of funk open source Bitcoin node too. Do you think I'm hyperbolizing? Ask Harsha. Let's see where the line used to be, where it is now, and where it may be in the future based on trends and existing compliance laws in TradFi. The original sin. If you touch fiat, you're beholden to regulations. So he starts out saying that to dispel the myth that compliance is boring, snorefest, he makes a good point. The boring narrative is a lie to keep people from looking into the truth. The reality is that the government holds a legal gun to the head of founders, and compliance rules dictate which bureaucrat can pull the trigger and under what circumstances. We're not talking about fines. The penalty for not complying is prison time, up to 10 years. But they masquerade it and they think to themselves rules and regulations. I remember Brian Shinobi from Bitcoin Magazine, he once wrote something like, you have to be a fool to not get engaged in politics because politics is engaging with you without you, if that makes any sense. So essentially, just watching from the sidelines doesn't make any sense because they're operating, they're moving, they're tying nooses, all that sort of stuff. Cool. So now compliance is exciting. I'm going to skip over a lot, but by and large, an entity's requirement to comply is determined by whether or not regulators designate it as a money transmitter. So essentially, a money transmitter is something that allows you to send and receive money. Haha, exciting. There's a financial crimes enforcement network. They put out guidelines in 2019, the creatively named FIN 2019, which dictates a lot, but essentially says, listen, if you convert fiat to crypto and vice versa, you're a money transmitter and have to comply with money transmitter regulations. This typically means KYC. So for those of you that don't know your customer. Every time you have to put your ID into a platform or something to be able to use it. That's KYC. And AML, anti-money laundering. It's so that you don't money launder because the state thinks that you're always money laundering. And state-by-state applications for approval. It also explicitly says you are a money transmitter if you use an unhosted wallet with keys stored locally, you use a hosted multi-sig setup, you are a developer of anonymizing software, you are a developer of a dApp, and you are an end user in control of your own value, using your own home-cooked software. Most folks in the know, at least I wasn't until this article, are probably familiar with these rules and they think that these rules are still in effect. They're not. The lines have been moved and the old FinCEN guidelines are more or less completely null. The noose is tied. And now he dives into a Samurai and Tornado Cash case. So Samurai is a privacy-preserving wallet, Bitcoin only. And then Tornado Cash is a anonymizing open source software. Over the past 2 years, two cases fundamentally altered how the U.S. government views software that FinCEN 2109 would not classify as money transmitters. In the United States versus Storm in September 2023, the DOJ charged the founders of Tornado Cash, a privacy-enhancing smart contract on Ethereum, with conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money transmitter service and money laundering. In April 2024, the DOJ indicted the founders of Samurai Wallet, a self-custodial software wallet, and CoinJoin service under the same name. Let's break this down for a second. A privacy-enhancing smart contract. So what you would do is you would send money into Tornado Cash, and through the astute and very well-written use of software and code, the code would essentially run itself, and it would anonymize the funds. So it would obfuscate where the funds came from, and where the money would go to, essentially giving the people using it a little bit more privacy, because for those of you that don't know, blockchains are for the most part public. They're pseudonymous, which means you can see the funds technically at all times, but you don't exactly know who's transmitting them. But now with money like Chainalysis, Elliptic Labs, TRM Labs, people are starting to do heuristic or probabilistic analysis, and they can figure out where that money is coming from and where it isn't. And then Samurai Wallet is something pretty similar. So they use a coin join, which is you get 100 people, they send in the exact same amount of money. That money then gets swirled in, it gets joined, and then it sends out in different amounts to the people, or to the people who sent in. But you've got money coming from all directions, so essentially you don't know which money belongs to who. He promotes the Bitcoin Policy Institute, putting out great work. I would recommend also looking at their report to understand what's going on. The cases and charges brought by the DOJ directly contradicted FinCEN's guidelines. In fact, Judge Falia redrew the money transmitter compliance line when she failed to dismiss U.S. versus Storm. Instead, she sided with the DOJ's argument that the Bank Secrecy Act, another incredible piece of legislation that allows the government to search and monitor all financial movements in the banking sector, good luck, does not require an entity to have control of funds to be considered a money transmitter. Under this interpretation, even software developers of fully self-custodial software can be considered money transmitters. Wow, so pretty much everybody's a money transmitter. I wonder, if I pass a physical dollar to somebody else, does that make me a money transmitter? If I pay for something somewhere, am I a money transmitter? Questions. So now the new ruling eliminates the first three, and now if you're a developer of a dApp, you're an end user in control of your own value, so that's perhaps you and I, holders of crypto, you're fine, it seems. The news tightens with new regulation. So this is new regulation from the IRS. You can find Harsha's full breakdown on Twitter. So the IRS regulation does a few key things. It formally tosses out nearly every crypto regulation, both foreign and domestic, and broadens the scope of a broker to anything that effectuates transactions. Basically, if you're helping facilitate a transaction, you're now a broker. And then he explains a little bit about IRS TD, what sort of tax implications it has, all that sort of stuff. This particular piece of bureaucratic work expands on the judicial work from earlier, broadening the scope of money transmitting to an entity that helps facilitate a transaction. They know exactly what they're doing. This is shrewd, writes Harsha.
And you thought the government was dumb.
Now, I see this all the time on Twitter, on forums, Telegram. The government is dumb. The government doesn't know what they're doing. The government this. I think they're a lot more clever than you think. In many cases, they're more clever than you, because you have to think there are people behind this. People, for the most part, are pretty clever, reasonably clever, sometimes dumb, but you always have one or two or some people that know what they're doing. And they're actively thinking of what you're doing. This is something that I know Lop has talked a lot about, which is the adversarial mindset, and something that's been lost in present day Bitcoin, which is this idea that on the internet, everybody's an adversary. Everybody's out to get you. Everybody's a scammer. Everybody's trying to, well, they're using their own incentives. So keep that in mind when you think to yourself, the government can't find me, or the government won't be able to shut us down, or anything like that. So they acknowledge, the government, that the purpose of decentralized applications is to circumvent regulations. However, there are still pain points with centralized entities in the process, and they intend to coerce those entities into obedience. Here he goes into Lightning Network. The Lightning Network, for those of you that don't know, is the only true layer 2 Bitcoin. What you do is that you open a channel, as it's called. You fund a channel between two people, and then you can send money between them. Think of any sats that you send as getting pushed around. So if you only have a channel open, you can just send money through that person. But if the person that you have a channel open has a channel open maybe with, say, 5, 10 other people, and you're paying the person that's 7th, you just use their channel. It's called routing. You just push it along, and it gets there instantly, super fast, super cheap, pretty private. And so now they're going after Lightning Network because, as he says, they are effectuating transactions via coded orders. So do you remember that list from earlier? It now looks a little bit like this. So now there's only the end user, pretty much. How the noose turned into a leash. By now, you ought to have picked up on a few things if you are as shrewd as the government. The government cares about asserting AML compliance and, by extension, OFAC compliance, which is how they financially strangle state enemies. Centralized entities have already been drawn and quartered. The cases are in the books. The precedent exists. All that's missing is comprehensive rules and guidelines on what compliance looks like so law enforcement can target offenders. It looks bad. But wait, you say. We still have FIN 2019's final exception. So that's that you're the end user in control of your own value using your own home-cooked software. But according to Harsha, this sense of safety is unjustified. Regulators have gone after centralized touchpoints because they're easy to police. And with them, regulators can effectively control all commerce on Bitcoin. They'll never outlaw Bitcoin. What they'll do instead is force everyone who facilitates transfers to use only clean coins, a guilty until proven innocent approach. In case you think this is absurd or it's impossible to enforce, this is how AML works for fiat today. When you apply for a loan, you provide bank statements that prove your funds are not ill-gained. They achieve this explicitly by forcing institutions to be the frontline defense for AML. If an institution is found to have accepted tainted funds, the institution is liable. Therefore, institutions are left with one choice: make sure all funds are clean before entering. This is why peer-to-peer Bitcoin is so important. This is why people are rightfully frightened of how much money people have on exchanges. This is why people are rightfully scared of how much money or how much Bitcoin is held in ETFs. I could carry on. Right now, compliance participation in firms that facilitate transfers between Bitcoin being bought and sold via exchanges, like wallet providers and Lightning nodes, is still too low to fulfill that obligation cleanly. But once that participation begins, it will be possible for institutions to see enough KYC checkpoints through a travel rule protocol, such as Coinbase's Trust. That's the future we're barreling towards, he says, and there are only a few speed bumps in sight. This is kind of ironic to me because he factors in Trump. So he complains a lot about regulation, but then he thinks about how Trump's presidency, the quintessential regulator, or you can think about him as a deregulator, he's reprieving us from the proverbial news. So far, the administration has essentially deregulated the SEC, and he's giving a good spanking to a few bureaucracies involved in Operation Choke Point 2.0. This is all good, but it's not what we need, says Harsha. And this is something that I've, again, fundamentally disagree. Do I fundamentally disagree with a lot of things? Do you fundamentally disagree? Or agree, sorry. Agree. Reverse. Rewind. Be kind. Do you want to leave me your comment if you do? That way we can figure it out, get up some conversations, all that sort of stuff. So we need two things. First and foremost, we need privacy tools in Bitcoin that provide for higher degrees of fungibility. Fungibility is essentially the same. So one Bitcoin is the same as another Bitcoin. There's no difference in this right, wrong, clean, white, black, brown. And then failing hard-coded cryptographic protections, we need legislative protections from Congress to shield this industry from overzealous bureaucratic actors and to provide a clear and fair framework that still embraces the ideals that many Bitcoiners share. It's not very punk to beg for a law to protect us, but I'm fed up with seeing my friends get prosecuted. Lightning is private. Stop being an alarmist. Lightning nodes are on servers, he says. I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. Servers are centralized. Regulators can target them. On-chain policing can effectively neuter Lightning. Neuter is when you cut the balls off a dog. Have dirty funds and want to wash them with onion routing? In a lightning-regulated world, no exchange will want to open a direct channel with you. Okay, so you open a node to some smaller intermediary node that isn't OFAC compliant, is likely just a node runner. Congratulations, you've defrauded that node runner. The dirty coins still exist. Now the node runner holds the bag and doesn't even realize that he'll not be able to spend those, or that the regulator will go after them, or all this sort of stuff. This is assuming fiat conversion points aren't pressured into dropping support for anything that even isn't kind of private. So we've seen attacks on Zcash, we've seen attacks on Monero, which are privacy enforcing, privacy preserving cryptocurrencies. So yeah, it's tough, because then he goes into like, what are Lightning wallets doing? Because he says Lightning wallets built-in privacy, complying with AML and KYC requirements for a money transmitter license is impractical. Combined with the egregious cost for money transmitter license, around $30 million for all 50 states, and a general notion of I'll wait and see, most Lightning companies don't possess money transmitter licenses. Only Lightspark, which Coinbase partners with, has received a few licenses. The front lines for this fight are in the courts, the ballot box, Twitter, and every town square. Twitter is the digital town square, you can say. This is incredible. Our largest allies at the legal institution and zeitgeist level are Coinbase, David Sachs, Mark Andreessen, and countless others. In contrast, there are no champions at the Bitcoin protocol level. There are some proposals with some cool privacy improvements whose work I follow closely, pay, join, and silent payments, but none of these are as drastic as we need, particularly because the tools in Bitcoin are currently lacking for any significant decentralized privacy upgrades. Cut the news. So, Bitcoin is the face of crypto, and crypto has too much momentum to be outright banned at this point. If functionality is possible in layer 1 Bitcoin with no special software, it's stapled to the Bitcoin narrative. The government has co-opted the Bitcoin narrative toward its own ends with regards to a strategic Bitcoin reserve or US branded stablecoins. It's time we get smart, upgrade Bitcoin right under their noses, and force them to rubber stamp privacy functionality that they hate. It's time we co-opt the government's crypto adoption towards our own means. If we don't, the US government gets to have its cake and eat too. They get to buy up as much as the supply, they get to completely gatekeep, they control who has access. We can't afford to dismiss compliance concerns and underestimate a fully crypto-aware government. I didn't get into Bitcoin to give the government a new financial weapon. Did you? Banger fucking banger. That's some pretty wild claims. So what do you think? I think most of what he says is true. I think privacy on Bitcoin is dismal or abysmal. I think people don't give a fuck, partly because it's kind of a chicken and an egg thing, because for starters, they don't think they'll ever get caught. Then they don't think that the government has enough manpower or money or resources to be able to come find them. Then you have the fact that privacy tools aren't the best either at the moment. Samurai Wallet was pretty cool. You got paynims and all that sort of stuff, but they shut it down. And there's also the general idea of, well, now you also have ETFs, exchanges, you've got self-custody, so holding your own keys is scary and daunting for a lot of people. So they're like, why am I going to use these if I've just had my money there? There's a vast majority of people that are in this for number go up and that only care about number go up. So as you can see, there's a lot of problems. What can we do? I'm supposing funding open source privacy protocols and projects, thinking about this more often, opening up the conversation. Like he says, ballot boxes, Twitter, forums, town squares, normalizing privacy, normalizing conversations about privacy, normalizing that privacy is a human right, all that sort of stuff. What do you think? Leave me your comments in the drop below. This is a topic that I'm fascinated by, that I'm supremely worried about, and that I don't think we talk about enough. So let me know below. Very interesting article. Remember, I read them, review them every week. Next can be yours. Choose your news.